She thought she was alone when she whispered, "Mama, please eat." I took it from the office. They were going to throw it away anyway. But through the narrow gap in the curtain, a man was watching. And he was crying. FolktalebyZEE, billionaire CEO of Orion Innovations, sat in his luxury SUV just meters away from the rusted one-room home. For the first time in 20 years, his throat burned, his chest ached, and his hands trembled. In front of him, the janitor he'd seen only once at work knelt beside a dying woman, feeding her cold jollof rice with tears silently running down her cheeks. This wasn't a pity. This was recognition. The billionaire wasn't just witnessing poverty. He was staring at a memory, one he had buried long ago. "Kemi," he whispered under his breath. The driver didn't ask questions. No one dared when Tun's voice broke like that. But how did they get here? That morning, the girl had only wanted one thing, leftover food. Not to steal. Not to beg. Just to survive. And now, the man who owned the company she cleaned at night, was about to risk everything to change her life. 12 hours earlier. Kemi Ayodele stood beside the boardroom table, her heart racing. The meeting had ended 10 minutes ago. The executives were gone. All that remained were crystal glasses, half-empty wine bottles, scattered cutlery, and the food. Plates of untouched grilled chicken. Bowls of fragrant jollof rice and soft plantains. Coleslaw glistening with mayonnaise. It smelled like wealth. But more than anything, it smelled like hope. She looked at the clock. Almost 6:40 p.m. Her mother hadn't eaten since the night before last. The hospital said the medicine wouldn't work unless taken with real food. But there was no money left. No help. Just a worn-out cleaning uniform, a tattered handbag, and desperation heavy on her back. Kemi's hands shook as she gently wrapped one plate in napkins. She placed it inside her bag beside the strip of paracetamol she had begged from a chemist and zipped it up quietly. She hadn't seen the man behind the tinted glass wall. FolktalebyZEE was not supposed to be at the office. He had returned from London early and slipped into the building without announcement. He was never late. Never loud. Never emotional. But that evening, he had arrived just in time to see the janitor steal company food. Only, she didn't eat it. She tucked it into her bag and left like someone who was carrying treasure. Or guilt. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply watched. Kemi didn't know she'd been seen. She walked fast through the side gate of Orion Innovations, turned down the main road, and melted into the noise of Lagos, where everyone was too busy surviving to notice a girl in a faded green uniform carrying stolen food. But Tund noticed. He stepped into his black SUV. "Andrew," he said to his driver, voice flat. "Follow her." Slowly. No lights. The man looked startled. "Sir, you mean the janitor? She has a name." And yes. The drive through Lagos traffic was slow and rough. Tund's world had always been in air-conditioned boardrooms and glass towers. But now, he was back in the thick of it, rusted buses, cracked pavements, boys hawking pure water between cars, women balancing oranges on their heads. She moved like she knew every corner. Every shortcut. Every danger. She crossed over a drainage trench, nodded to an old vendor by a burning heap of trash, and passed a mechanic shop where men sat drinking palm wine from old bottles. The sun was gone. The sky, now gray and moody. Finally, she turned into a narrow alley. Rusted gates. Torn posters. Children barefoot in the dust. She reached a small building with walls that looked like they had once been painted yellow. Now, they were brown. A curtain flapped weakly over the doorway. She entered. Tund leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. He could see inside just enough. The room was barely lit. A woman lay on a mattress, skin pale, eyes sunken. Her legs were wrapped with worn cloths, and beside her were empty medicine sachets. Kemi knelt beside her. "Mama," she said, forcing a smile. "I brought rice." The older woman coughed. "No, it's not stolen," Kemi whispered, as if answering a question no one had asked. "They threw it away. I just didn't want it to go to waste." She unwrapped the food, took a plastic spoon from her bag, and began feeding her. "I'll eat later," she said. The woman smiled faintly. Kemi adjusted her mother's wrapper and kissed her forehead. "One day, things will change," she whispered. "I promise." Outside, Tun turned away, blinking hard. He couldn't watch anymore. Not because it was painful, but because it was familiar. He had once been a child just like her. Alone. Broke. Feeding his mother bread soaked in water and pretending it was soup. He sold cigarettes in Yaba. Slept under bridges in Bariga. People thought he had no past, but that was because he made sure no one ever asked. Until now. This girl had reminded him. She hadn't begged. She hadn't stolen. She hadn't lied. She had taken what no one wanted, and turned it into love. His driver said nothing. Tund whispered, "Let's go." But he didn't sleep that night. Back at his penthouse, Tund stood by the window overlooking the island. He had built empires. He had signed billion-naira deals, fired top executives, and made grown men beg for second chances. But tonight, the only face he saw was hers. Kemi. He remembered that someone in HR had once mentioned her. Quiet girl. Worked overtime. Never complained. Lived far out. Always early. He picked up his phone. Opened the internal employee database. Found her profile. Kemi Ideal. Janitor. Employed since March last year. 45,000 Nigerian nairas salary. No health insurance. No emergency contact. There was a note. Turned down company Christmas party due to family emergency. Tun shut the screen. He sat down slowly. And for the first time in years, his hand trembled. Back in Mushin, Kemi stayed awake long after her mother fell asleep. The food had been enough to help with one dose of medication. But what about tomorrow? And the day after? She stared at the leaking ceiling, the cracked walls, the pile of rejection letters for nursing school stuffed under her mattress. Her dreams had faded a long time ago. Now, all that mattered was keeping her mother alive. She had no idea that her life had already begun to change. That someone was watching. And he wasn't done. The next morning, Kemi scrubbed the marble floor of the executive lobby with quiet urgency. Her hands ached. Her knees burned. But she didn't stop. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She didn't know if someone had seen her take the food. Maybe there was a camera. Maybe the receptionist, Ngozi, had seen her. Maybe security would call her aside. Every whisper felt louder today. Every eye felt like it lingered too long. She kept her head down, moving from tile to tile like she was erasing herself. Behind the tinted glass of the executive conference room, Tunde Owolabi stood again. But this time, not in hiding. He watched her closely. She moved differently today. Her shoulders were tight, her eyes sunken. She looked afraid. He hated that look. He turned to his assistant. "I want her file brought to my office," he said. "You mean, the janitor?" his assistant asked, unsure if he'd heard right. Tun shot him a cold look. The man nodded quickly and left. An hour later, the file landed on Tun's mahogany desk. It was barely 3 pages. Kemi Ideal. Age, 26. No siblings listed. Secondary school graduate. Mother's name, Ronk Ideal. No photograph. No emergency contacts. No bank statement. Just a work record showing perfect attendance, not one late arrival, and no complaints. That alone made her rare. Tund leaned back in his chair. "Call her in," he said suddenly. "Sir," his assistant blinked. "I want to speak to her. Personally." Kemi nearly dropped the mop when her name echoed over the intercom. "Janitor Kemi Ayodele, report to the CEO's office." The floor froze. The receptionist gasped. One intern dropped a stapler. "Ha! She's finished," Ngozi muttered from behind the desk. "She's been caught." Kemi stood there, numb. It felt like her skin peeled back with heat. Her legs wouldn't move. "Go, now," one of the security guards nudged her. "Don't keep Oga waiting." Kemi wiped her hands on her uniform and walked slowly up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. She'd never even been near the top floor. Now she was being summoned. To Tund Owolabi. The man who built Orion from scratch. The man who didn't tolerate excuses. She didn't know if she was about to lose her job, get arrested, or worse. All because of a single plate of rice. She knocked gently. "Come in," his voice said. She stepped in, head bowed. "Sir, good morning." Tund studied her for a long moment. She didn't lift her head. "Sit," he said calmly. She sat on the edge of the chair like someone about to be sentenced. He opened her file, flipped the pages slowly, then closed it. "You've worked here for over a year," he said. "Never missed a day. Always early. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I need the job, sir. And you took leftover food yesterday. From the executive boardroom." Her breath caught. He had seen her. She gripped the hem of her skirt, fighting panic. I'm sorry, sir," she whispered. "I know it was wrong. I didn't mean to steal. It was going to waste, and my mother, she's sick. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. I didn't know what else to do." Her voice cracked. Tund leaned forward. "What's wrong with your mother?" Kemi blinked. She hadn't expected the question. She's paralyzed on one side. Since last year. A market roof collapsed on her. We can't afford surgery. I give her the medicine slowly. When I can." Tund nodded slowly. "How long have you been her only caretaker?" "Since I was 21, sir. I do small jobs on weekends. This job is the only steady one. I send her food every day. If I can't find food, I just boil water and lie." Tears slipped from her eyes. She didn't wipe them. There was no use pretending anymore. "I understand," Tund said softly. Kemi's eyes widened. "Sir. You didn't steal. You did what a daughter had to do." She looked up now, fully, for the first time. And she saw him, not the cold billionaire on company posters, but a man who seemed deeply haunted. Tund stood. "Effective immediately, you're being moved to a different department. A better one. You'll work as assistant to the facility coordinator." Kemi's mouth opened slightly. "Sir. Your salary will triple. You'll be given healthcare benefits. And a company apartment, closer to here. With electricity. And running water." She couldn't speak. Her body froze, like her brain refused to catch up. "Why?" she finally asked in a breath. Tund looked at her. "I saw you, Kemi. I followed you home. And what I saw reminded me of everything I fought to forget." He walked slowly to the window, hands in his pocket. "My mother died the night I couldn't bring her food. I was 11. I had begged for bread, and they laughed at me. I swore I would never be weak again. Kemi stared, stunned. But last night, he continued, I saw someone who did everything I couldn't. And I knew I couldn't walk away from it again. The office was quiet for a long moment. Tun turned back to her. I'm not doing this out of pity. I'm doing this because you've already earned it. You just never had the spotlight. She broke down. Not loudly, but like someone whose body gave up holding the pain inside. He handed her a clean napkin from his desk. That small gesture, so normal, so human, shook her more than the raise, the housing, or the promotion. Thank you, sir, she choked out. But as she left his office moments later, face still wet, none of the staff understood what had just happened. All they saw was Kemi, silent, still wearing her janitor uniform, walking down the executive stairs. But her life had already changed. And soon, the world would know. Kemi stood outside the staff quarters with the keys still in her hand. The small white apartment in front of her looked like something out of a dream, painted walls, working ceiling fan, clean tiled floor. A bed with fresh sheets. A fridge humming gently in the corner. She couldn't move. She had slept on bare mats for most of her adult life. Shared a room with her sick mother, sometimes with strangers in the same compound. But now, this was hers. A place without cockroaches, without leaking roofs, without the smell of stagnant gutters or kerosene smoke. She stepped inside slowly. Closed the door behind her. And cried. It wasn't the kind of sobbing that tore through your chest. It was the soft, exhausted kind, the kind that came after surviving too much for too long. That evening, she returned to Mushin one last time. She packed her mother's few belongings into a borrowed taxi. With gentle hands, she wrapped her mother in a blanket, explained nothing, and helped her into the back seat. Mama, we're going somewhere better, she said, holding her hand. Her mother didn't ask how or why. She just smiled faintly, and for the first time in months, closed her eyes in peace. At Orion Innovations, the staff couldn't stop whispering. Kemi, the janitor, one HR officer said. She's now an admin. Moved to a company apartment, another added. With full benefits. Did she win the lottery? No. Oh. The CEO himself made the call. They said he even cried. Ngozi, who once mocked Kemi for being too quiet, now stared at her with wide, confused eyes. Kemi still greeted her politely every morning. Still smiled. But there was a glow now, one that couldn't be explained with just new clothes or a new job. It was dignity. Something no one could steal. Tund watched from afar. He hadn't spoken to her again. Not directly. He didn't want to make it awkward or turn her into an office story. He just observed, quietly, carefully. She was adjusting fast, learning everything. Helping others. Keeping to herself. But one afternoon, something changed. Tund had a board presentation. He entered the executive lounge where files were being arranged, and paused. Kemi was there, helping another staff member fix a faulty projector. She turned just as he walked in. Their eyes met. Good afternoon, sir, she said calmly. He nodded. Afternoon, Kemi. Something passed between them. Respect. Recognition. Gratitude. And maybe, something else neither of them had the words for. After the meeting, Tun stepped out into the hallway and saw his lawyer waiting. Sir, the man said. There's something you need to see. Tun's brows furrowed. What is it? The lawyer handed him a brown folder. Background check, as requested. Tun didn't remember asking for it. But months ago, when they first hired cleaning staff through an agency, a generic form had been filed on each recruit. He opened the folder, flipping through Kemi's records. And froze. There was a document he hadn't seen before. One he wasn't supposed to see. It was a legal petition, quietly buried in court. Filed by her mother, against a name he hadn't heard in years. Mr. Akin Owolabi. His father. Tun's heart dropped. He stared at the paper again. The dates. The allegations. Paternity claim. 1996, case dismissed due to lack of response. Kemi's mother had filed it before Tund ever became successful. Back when his father was alive. There were details. A short relationship. Denial. Abandonment. A lost child. Kemi. Tund's hand began to shake. He dropped the folder. No, this can't be. If it were true, if the documents were real, then the girl he had watched suffer, the one he had cried for, was his sister. That night, Tund didn't go home. He drove aimlessly through the city, windows down, breathing in the scent of fried akra and dust. The streets of Lagos blurred around him, but his mind stayed fixed on one image, Kemi kneeling beside her mother, offering food with love in her hands. And the man who had turned his back on them. His father. A man who had hidden shame with silence. Who had built wealth and left behind wounds. Tund always believed he'd come from struggle and rose alone. But now, he saw the truth, someone else had struggled too, alone, invisible, suffering in silence. He returned to the apartment complex around midnight. The lights in Kemi's window were off. But he sat outside anyway. Watching. Thinking. He had wanted to save her. He had no idea he was trying to save himself. The next day, Kemi walked into work and found a letter on her desk. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Kemi. Please meet me in the rooftop garden at 1:30. I need to tell you something important. Tund. She stared at it for a long time. The rooftop was private, usually reserved for board meetings, rarely used. She had only seen it from pictures. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the paper. At exactly 1:30, she climbed the stairs. Tund was already there, standing beneath the umbrella tree near the fountain, hands in his pocket. Kemi, he said softly. She walked up slowly. I'm sorry if this is strange, he said. But I had to see you. I found something. She blinked. He handed her the folder. She flipped it open. Her mother's handwriting jumped off the page. The paternity claim. The court stamp. The year. Kemi's breath caught. How did you get this? Tund's voice shook. My father was Akin Owolabi. Kemi's eyes filled with disbelief. No, that's not possible. My mother, she said he was dead. He never came back. I know, Tund whispered. Because he was raising me. Silence. Long, heavy. Devastating. You're saying, we're. Tund nodded. Yes. I think you're my sister. Kemi stepped back, shaking her head. No. I can't. This can't be true. Her legs gave way and she stumbled onto the bench. Tund moved to help, but she waved him off. For the first time, her voice rose. Do you know what we went through? Do you know what it's like to beg for food, while your own blood lives in a mansion? Tund's eyes welled up. I didn't know. If I had, Kemi, I swear, I would have looked for you. I would have done something. Anything. She stood up. You helped me. Yes. You changed my life. But this? This changes everything. I don't want to hurt you, he said gently. I don't even know what to feel, she replied. Her heart was pounding. Her mind was spinning. I need time. She walked away slowly, leaving him in the garden, hands still shaking. But neither of them knew that someone else was watching from behind the glass door. Ngozi. Phone in hand. Already dialing a tabloid reporter. The next morning, Lagos woke up to a storm, not of rain, but of whispers, headlines, and viral tweets. Exclusive, Orion CEO found his long-lost sister among janitorial staff. Billionaire heir's hidden family exposed. From mob to mansion, shocking truth behind Orion's silent worker. It was everywhere. Pictures of Kemi. Blurry shots of her entering the company apartment. A zoomed-in image of her with Tund on the rooftop garden. A photo of the court file, barely censored. Kemi's face, once invisible, was now on every gossip blog, trending on Twitter, whispered in offices and beauty salons all over the country. She didn't know until she walked into work. People turned. Conversations stopped. Phones pointed toward her. It was Ngozi who approached her first, grinning like she had won a lottery. Kemi. You didn't tell us you were family with Oga, she said, loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. You know, some of us would have treated you better. Kemi's mouth went dry. What are you talking about? Ngozi turned her phone around. There it was. Everything. Exposed. She backed away, eyes wide. Her ears rang. Her heart slammed in her chest. She rushed toward the elevator, but Tund was already coming down. His face was pale. Jaw tight. I didn't leak it, he said quickly, I swear, Kemi. I don't know who did. But Kemi couldn't breathe. Everyone knows now, she whispered. I wanted to tell you first. In private. On your terms. I didn't want this. She looked at him, not as a boss. Not as a brother. Not as a billionaire. But as someone who had shattered the last piece of safety she had. You don't get to fix this, she said quietly. He stepped closer. I want to protect you. She shook her head. No. You want to control the story. I've lived my entire life being invisible. You think this is help? This is noise. And then she turned, walking out of the building without her bag, her badge, or her dignity. The headlines didn't stop. By the next day, journalists were waiting outside her apartment gate. Neighbors whispered. A man from a local church claimed to have raised Kemi in Sunday school. Old classmates popped up with fake memories. Even her mother, confused and overwhelmed, kept asking, why are people calling me Mummy Billionaire? Kemi locked the door, turned off her phone, and cried. Everything she had earned, her dignity, her silence, her privacy, had been stolen by a story she didn't write. She thought of leaving Lagos. Vanishing. Starting over somewhere she could be no one again. But then the knock came. She ignored it. It came again. Louder. She stood, walked to the door slowly, and opened it. Tund stood outside, no bodyguards, no suit. Just him. With red eyes and a trembling voice. I didn't know what family meant until I saw you feed your mother with leftover rice. Kemi didn't speak. I don't deserve forgiveness. But you deserve a voice. He handed her an envelope. She opened it. Inside was a press statement, written with her name as the author. Not his. Not the company's. Hers. It explained the truth, her mother's past with Akin Owolabi, the paternity claim, the years of silence, and how Tund only discovered it weeks ago. It ended with one line. I am not Cinderella. I am not a scandal. I am a survivor. Kemi looked up. You wrote this? I edited it, he said. But you decide what to do with it. Post it. Burn it. Say nothing. Say everything. It's your story. She stared at him for a long moment. And finally, the tension in her shoulders softened. But just as she opened her mouth to speak, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, and froze. The same gossip blog that leaked the first story had just dropped a new one. Breaking, DNA test results leaked, Tunde Owolabi not Kemi Ayodele's brother. She clicked on the article. Her stomach flipped. There, in black and white, was a leaked lab result with her name and Tunde's. No genetic relation found. Kemi's breath caught. Tunde's eyes widened. What? She read the line again. No match, she whispered. But, that can't be. I checked the court file. Tunde, her voice broke. What if, we're not family at all? His jaw clenched. The room spun. And suddenly, the truth became more confusing than ever. Because if they weren't siblings, then why did this feel like the deepest loss either of them had ever known? Kemi sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the lab result in her hands. The room felt too quiet, too still, like the air itself didn't know what to do. No genetic relation found. That single sentence unraveled everything. She had spent days trying to process the possibility of being related to a man who had unknowingly shaped her suffering. And just as her heart began to build something, a connection, a fragile hope, this truth broke it again. She had been abandoned once. And now, she felt discarded again, only this time by truth itself. Across the city, Tunde paced his office in silence. He had made the appointment with the best lab in the country. Had even paid to expedite the results. But now, he stared at the paper in disbelief. His thoughts circled in chaos. If she wasn't his sister, then why had his father's name appeared in that case file? He called his lawyer immediately. Go back into the court records. Dig deeper. I want to know everything, who filed it, how it was processed, if anything was forged. I want names. The lawyer hesitated. Sir, why now? Because this isn't about company reputation anymore. It's about her. The next day, Kemi returned to the old compound in Mushin. She needed answers. She found her mother sitting by the window, wrapped in her usual scarf, humming softly. Mama, she said gently. I need to ask you something. Her mother looked up. Did you ever lie about who my father was? A silence fell. Ronk's face tensed. Her lips trembled. I didn't lie, she said slowly. But I wasn't sure. And by the time I was, he was gone. I was afraid no one would believe me. I filed the case late. There was no proof, no support. I was alone. You said his name was Akin Owolabi, Kemi pressed. Her mother nodded. That was the name he gave me. He told me he had family in Surulere. He disappeared before you were born. But what if he lied? Ronk's eyes widened. What? What if his name wasn't real? At Orion Innovations, the lawyer burst into Tunde's office, panting. Sir. I found it. Tunde looked up sharply. The court file wasn't forged, but it was confused. There were two different Akin Owolabis in the system. One in Mushin, one in Ikeja. The man listed in Kemi's file wasn't your father. It was someone else entirely. Tunde's chest tightened. So we're not related? No, sir. He leaned back, eyes glazed. For a brief moment, it felt like losing her all over again. But strangely, in the center of his grief, there was relief. Not because she wasn't his sister. But because now, nothing stood between them. Kemi received the news the same day. Tunde sent the updated documents, along with a voice note. You were never my sister, Kemi. But I've never felt closer to anyone in my life. I don't know what this means for you. I don't expect anything. But I want you to know, my respect for you didn't come from blood. It came from who you are. She played the message twice. And cried again. But this time, it wasn't grief. It was clear. 1 week later, Kemi stood at a podium inside the newly launched Orion Women's Foundation, an initiative funded by Tund, and co-led by her. The hall was filled with young girls from underprivileged communities. Some had mothers in hospitals. Some had never owned a pair of shoes. Kemi looked out at them and smiled. When I was just a cleaner, I thought I was invisible, she began. But the truth is, we're only invisible to people who forget how they started. She paused. And sometimes, the people who change your life don't need to be family by blood. Just by heart. Tund, seated in the front row, looked up at her, not as a CEO, not as a man who once cried in a car, but as someone who had been changed by the quiet strength of a woman who asked for leftover food, and gave back more than he could have ever imagined. The room erupted in applause. And for the first time in years, both Kemi and Tund felt full. Not from food. But from purpose. 6 months later. Kemi walked into the same conference room where it all began. The long table was set again, executives chatting, food served, the clinking of silverware echoing softly. This time, she wasn't there to clean. She was there as one of the keynote speakers. As she walked past the food, she smiled gently to herself. Because she knew somewhere out there, another girl like her was watching. And this time, someone was going to see her.